Welcome back to the fourth part of our series on changing your lenses, changing your perspective of your circumstances, changing your perspective of your identity in Christ, and changing your perspective of God Himself. And it is specifically this last item, your perspective of God Himself, that we're going to focus on today. And this may be one of the most difficult discussions that we've ever had. Not because it's difficult to talk about, but because for many of us, myself included, it requires us to take an honest and hard look at what we truly believe about God. And repenting, which means changing our mind, regarding our beliefs about God accordingly. So join me today as we have a tough but necessary discussion regarding changing our lenses of God. Hi, I'm Jim. I'd like to welcome you to Thriving Branch today as we continue our discussion regarding changing your lenses. Changing your perspective of the world around you, your circumstances, yourself, and of God. And it's that final thing, your perspective about God, that we're going to have a discussion about today. Because many people have a negative perception, a negative perspective, a negative lens of God. And for this discussion today, we're going to be reading one of the parables of Jesus, which is the parable of the talents. You may have heard that parable before, but we're going to see some things in it today that's going to greatly change our lenses regarding God. Because this parable, more than any other, highlights some things about God that's going to force us to come face to face with who God actually is. And we're going to encounter some truths about God that may very well expose some of our own misconceptions. And we're going to be answering one specific question that a lot of people, including Christians, secretly have about God. And it was a question that I've had for most of my life as well. It's a very simple question. Is God a jerk? Is God a jerk? And I want to encourage you right from the start to not let that question scare you away. Don't let that question frighten you. Don't let that question cause you to draw back. Because regardless of how you may personally phrase that question, it is a question that many people have about God. Again, including Christians. It's a question that we shouldn't be afraid to honestly ask and honestly look at. There are many people who secretly in their heart hold a perspective of God being mean or unfair or hard or harsh. And when you have that perspective of God, it can put up a wall that prevents intimate relationship. When you have a bad, negative perspective of God, it can block intimate union. It can block intimate relationship because you can't have an intimate relationship with someone who you're afraid of, or that you think is mean, or that you think is hard or harsh. If you have that view of someone, it blocks intimacy. No different than with God. So let's begin today by reading this parable, the parable of the talents, which can be found in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. And let's answer this question of, is God a jerk? Read this with me, Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. Ready? Let's read together. 1, 2, Read. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered to them his goods. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his ability, and then took his journey. He that had received the 5 talents went and traded with those talents, and made another 5 talents. And likewise, he that had received 2 talents, he also gained another 2. But he that had received 1 went and dug in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came back and reckoned with them. And so, he that had received 5 talents came and brought the other 5 talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said to him, Well done, you good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter you into the joy of your Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you, that you are a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not strewed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the earth. See, there you have what is yours. His Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strewed? You ought therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then, at my coming, I should have received my own with interest. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it to him which has 10 talents. For to every one that has, more shall be given, but from him that has not shall be taken away, even that which he has. And cast you the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And you know, my friend, this parable is so often taught in a negative way that breeds fear and condemnation and resentment towards God that it's absolutely tragic. When I was younger, the parable was taught like this. When God gives you a gift, no matter how small, make sure you make good use of it, or you'll be punished, you'll lose everything, and eventually wind up in hell. That's the way the parable was taught when I was younger. And that manner of preaching absolutely did breed fear and confusion into me when I was younger. I was afraid that if I wasn't making good use of something that God gave me, even if I didn't know what it was or how to use it, I was being set up for punishment. However, that type of preaching misses the wonderful details of this parable. It actually shows a completely different picture of God. You see, a talent is actually a unit of measurement for gold or silver. It's mentioned in Exodus chapter 38, verse 24. It's equivalent to about 6,000 Roman denarii. Now, one single denarius is equal to a full day's wage for labor. So upon doing the calculation, 1 talent, which remember is 6,000 denarii, is equal to roughly about 15 years' wages. So this is actually a huge sum of money that's being delivered to the 3 servants. Even the 3rd servant, who only received 1, that we typically think of as being shortchanged in this whole deal, he still received a huge sum of money. He received 15 years' wages. So this parable begins by actually showing us the extravagance and generosity of God. So we can see here that God is generous. Keep that fact in mind as we continue. God is generous. Now I want us to take a look at the 3rd servant here in this story, because this tells us something very important regarding our lenses of God. Now, as we look at this closely, take notice of the servant's statement in verse 24, my friend. He says, "Lord, I knew you to be a hard man." And this gives us insight into how his lenses of his master, how his perspective of his master were actually skewed. He had skewed lenses. Do you see? This servant had warped lenses. He knew his master as a hard man. That's how the servant thought of and saw his master. And this had the unfortunate effect of breeding fear. He says, "I was afraid." It bred fear in the heart of the servant regarding his master, and causing him to bury the large sum of money that he was given instead of using and investing it. Now, real talk between you and me. There are many people who have this exact same view regarding God. There are a vast number of believers who see God as a hard, demanding taskmaster. And it breeds the same fear as we see in this story. I had the same view of God for many years. Many years. I also saw God as demanding. I saw God as an object of fear. I saw God as someone to never draw close to because I was too afraid of how he might react. I was too afraid of the impending punishment. I was afraid to move. I was afraid to make choices. Basically, I was afraid to do anything because if it was the wrong thing, then God would be angry because I made the wrong choice. I misused what he had given me. And then the punishment would come. And my friend, there are so many Christians who feel the exact same way about God. They pray endlessly for direction because they are in terror of making the wrong choice, because God is harsh in their view. Any little thing they do wrong is going to reap punishment. Now, I'm not discounting asking God for direction. I'm not downplaying that. It's right to ask God for direction. As your father and your shepherd, he can and will certainly provide guidance and wisdom for any situation or circumstance. Absolutely he will. In fact, it's the mark of every good shepherd to lead his sheep, and it's the mark of every good father to guide his children and provide for his children. And God is the best at both of those things. And there is a huge value in waiting to have a clear response from God. I've seen a lot of people make quick decisions and then regret it later because they didn't wait for God's leading. I get that. Only a fool would move before the way is clear. So I'm not discrediting asking God for wisdom. I'm not discrediting waiting for his response. Absolutely not. Don't misunderstand me there. What I am saying, though, is that waiting forever is not an option. And waiting forever is often a tool of the enemy to keep people paralyzed, as it did for me. For example, I've watched people wait for their healing until they were dead. I've seen that happen. They thought that God was waiting to heal them for the right time. And they would say things like, "Oh, it's just not his timing yet." That was their daily theme song. I'm waiting for God's perfect timing to heal me. And they saw God as somebody who withholds healing for the right time. And the right time never came. They saw God as someone who was kind of stingy, rather than the generous giver that we see in this parable. And there is not one single example throughout Jesus' entire life of him ever telling anyone that he's going to purposefully delay and continue to prolong your suffering when Jesus already paid to give salvation to you as a free gift. See, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 says, "We then, as workers together with him, beseech you that you also receive not the grace of God in vain. For he said, I've heard you in a time accepted. In a day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation." Salvation in Greek is soteria, which is a broadly defined word that includes health and safety and deliverance and prosperity, my friend. Verse 1 here in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 says, "Do not receive the grace of God in vain." Sadly, there are many who have. There are so many people who believe that either God is unwilling or unable to help in the here and now. If that's you today, I want you to know that he is willing and able to help in the here and now. Read this verse again with me. Read it again with me. "I have heard you in a time accepted. In the day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation." The word behold means to look and see. Now is the time. Today is the day. There are so many people, my friend, who think that they need to suffer through this life until they finally reach the sweet by and by of heaven. But that's why verse 2 of this text is here. Now is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation. Now is the time of healing and health. Now is the time of protection and deliverance. Now is the day of provision and prosperity. You won't need any of that up in heaven. You'll have it already. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16 makes this absolutely clear. "Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need." I want you to notice, my friend, that we are supposed to come boldly, not in fear, not in trepidation, not in some kind of religious false humility, but boldly, and that means with confidence, knowing who God is, knowing his divine love, knowing his generous nature, knowing who we are in Christ, knowing that we are his children, and as part of his kingdom and family, we have the right to come boldly. We're supposed to come boldly. We're told to come boldly. We should come boldly to the throne of grace. Not to the throne of Moses, not to the throne of the law, but to the throne of grace in Christ. There you will not find condemnation. You won't find it there. You won't find the heavy burden of guilt and shame. You will not be disappointed. You will not be let down. But you will obtain mercy and find grace to help. Not useless grace, not ethereal grace, but grace to help in time of need. Do you see? This is for the here and now. It's not relegated off to some unknown time in the future. This is for the here and now. In the parable of the talents that we read at the beginning, the third servant's fate did not end well, did it? He was rebuked by his master, he had his money taken away, and was ultimately cast into hell. Now I want you to consider this. The master was not angry with the servant for being afraid, but rather for not profiting from that which was given to him. That's very clear in the story. The master was not angry with the servant for being afraid, but he was angry because he wasn't able to profit from that which was given to him. Likewise, today, we have been given much more than a talent of gold. We have been given Jesus Christ and the full riches of his kingdom, according to Romans chapter 8, verse 32. And as we also read today, we are advised to not receive the grace of God in vain. The servant, the third servant in the parable, received his money in vain. And because of a wrong, fearful view of his master, he never allowed the gift to profit him. And there are countless Christians today walking around in absolutely terrible perspectives of defeat and spiritual bankruptcy because they believe they have nothing. They believe they have nothing except an IOU to be redeemed at an unknown time in the future when they go to heaven. What we have seen today proves that that is not true. I want to encourage you today, my friend, change your lenses about God. Change your lenses about yourself. Change your lenses about what you have in Christ Jesus. If you want to know more about how to live in your new identity, I want you to check out the many resources here on ThrivingBranch.com and send me a message. Send me a message if you have any questions. All of this exists. These videos, ThrivingBranch.com, all of this exists for you. I do this because I want to share what God has given me with you. All of this is for you. And I pray that this discussion today has helped you. And this entire series about changing your lenses has encouraged and empowered you. And I look forward to thriving with you again next week, my friend. Be blessed. Thank you for joining me for today's Bible study. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others. And be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so that you never miss a video. I also invite you to check out ThrivingBranch.com, where you'll find a lot more information and resources on the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'd also like to let you know that you can help support me in this ministry through your prayers, your sharing of the information with others, and through your financial giving as the Spirit of God leads you. Regardless of which way you choose, I want you to know that every single prayer, every single share, and every single financial gift is appreciated and really does help me in this ministry. I want to thank you again for your continued support, and be blessed.